Scene 5, the final Shellshock. Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Hyperstone Heist. In the last row we did stages 3 and 4, and well, now we're in the 5th and final stage of the game, easily the longest as well. It's kind of a combination of the Technodrome stage from Turtles in Time Super Nintendo version, and the far-flung future space satellite stage from the same game. With that said, while they throw basically everything in the kitchen sink at you here, it's a lot easier than the equivalent stage in TMNT 3, for example, if only again because not only is this an easier game, you have enough combat options, but they also throw quite a couple of health restoratives in here, on top of the fact that you just get more lives in this game. The biggest annoyance of this stage is if you lose a lot of lives early on, you're kind of out of luck in the long run, as you're really going to want to have it for the penultimate boss, similarly to Turtles 3. Honestly, basically every Turtles game I've ever played, usually the second to last boss is harder than the actual last boss. Like the Technodrome itself is a harder boss in TMNT 1. Well, I'll say that was the case in TMNT 2, TMNT 3, it's definitely the case. Turtles in Time, yeah, here, yeah. Seeing the Mousers is a little weird to me, because as I've said before, growing up, I watched the 2003 show, but my main exposure to it as a real little kid was watching some VHSs of the 80s series that my brother had, and playing with his toys. And it makes me realize I don't think I really had any of the Turtles toys from, like, the 2003 show while I was growing up. Maybe I had at most, like, a Leonardo and a Shredder, but that was really about it. And it makes me wonder if I really missed out on anything with that toy line, I guess, in a way. I never really interacted with the 2012 series toy line because I was more focused on getting other figure types at that point, namely model kits. And from what I've seen of the Rise toy line, not worth it. It is, I guess, appropriate in a way, given how many toys they made for the 80s series, though, because this series was unstoppable until, like, mid-90s with its original merch sales. I know they basically made every type of Turtles they could under the sun, like they did for Barbie in a way. Mind you, if a media franchise is big enough in sales in some form that it eventually gets its own holiday special like Turtles did, like Muppets did, you know that has some market appeal. Because, like, for instance, Transformers has always been big, but I don't think it's ever had an outright holiday special, like maybe a series here or there will have a holiday-oriented episode, but that's really about it. I can't think of a holiday special outright for it. Same with He-Man or a lot of those other ones from the time. It's like Turtles and Muppets. They had holiday specials. Star Wars had one, and that's big on toy sales and market appeal. Lego has had several of different varieties, namely Star Wars, once again, because that series is unstoppable, to a scary extent, honestly. And I guess on the topic of bringing up the holiday special, I really need to go back and watch the early live-action movies again, because honestly, the one I've seen the most recently is Turtles 3, and it shouldn't stay that way, because Turtles 1 and 2 I remember just being better movies, even though they have some weird stuff to them. Like, Turtles 1 was absurdly dark, like it's much closer in tone to the comics from memory than the cartoon at the time. And Turtles 2 tries to remedy that, but it also makes a really cool little final villain that goes out real weekly. There was that weird 2007 movie. Or was that 2008? Either way, that was a weird one, but I liked it. I was kind of surprised that 2012 didn't take more notes from that overall, honestly. Now the question is, when I do that, do I also revisit the really short-lived live-action TV show that ran alongside Power Rangers in Space? Probably not. I don't remember that being good even when I saw episodes of it as a real little kid. But I might as well, just for curiosity's sake, I guess, because it's been so long. It's around this point in the stage you need to be a bit careful about where you walk around, because they start placing more hazards in the way, like these freeze sprayers. These are ripped right out of that one stage in Turtles in Time, I believe. They are at set locations, but you can't tell where they are until you've accidentally activated one. So walk and actually charge around carefully when it comes to that. Thankfully, their hitboxes are a little weird, as their vertical position is kind of hard to judge, so while that can work against you, it can also work in your favor as long as you're also at a kind of weird vertical position. And moving forward, we're going to get a couple more hazards, like I think we eventually get. Yeah, there's the bowling balls right out of stage 1 in Turtles in Time. And I think we start getting some conveyor belts and lasers right out of the end of the final stage from Turtles 3, now that I think about it. Something a little weird, though, and I think I loosely brought this up in Turtles 3. This is loosely based off a particular episode of the show, episodes even. The Hyperstone itself was based off the Eye of Sarnath, I think it was, which was a 3-fragmented stone that Shredder was looking for and eventually united all 3 pieces. In fact, its 3 pieces might come up in a cutscene towards the end of the game. It's very loosely adapted to the point where I don't even think the gems in the show had any effects that the Hyperstone seems to have. It very much is just them kind of reaching into the show's catalog of items to use to loosely adapt it in order to loosely adapt Turtles in Time to the Genesis, more or less. Hyperstone is definitely a bit of a weird case in the series where it's a combination of like 4 different things in different directions just to give the Genesis some Turtles action. Because otherwise, I think the only Turtles game that the Genesis got was just its own version of the Tournament Fighter game. Which, you know, cool. I'd rather play a fighting games on the Super Nintendo overall, unless I'm using the 6-button controller, but at least it's there. Oh, here's the lasers. Was wondering where those were. Sometimes I tend to forget what order of operation some of these stages come in, despite them actually having set pieces compared to Turtles 3. Get ready, though, because we are coming up on the first boss fight for this stage, and like I said earlier, I think it's the hardest boss in the game. Far and away, because basically every other boss in this game, as you've seen, isn't much to write home about. Because once we get over these lasers, it's time for good old Krang. I'll show you the power of Super Krang! This boss fight's more or less ripped right out of the... I can't remember the name of the stage, but the future stage that's on Earth in Turtles in Time. He's gonna fly all over the place, often going off-screen and come back on-screen either with missiles or a kick attack that can be kinda quick to come out without warning. The missile attack, like the missile attack in Turtles 3, is overall what you want to see him do because it leaves him super open to about 2 to 4 hits. But you really want to be careful of that kick because it can kind of come out quickly if you're trying to just bring in some attacks. He doesn't move too fast, but I'd still say he's overall the hardest boss in the game just because of that kick alongside his overall very fast movement compared to other fights. Alright, he also has the kind of downward slam attack. I always forget about that one. He's the hardest boss in the game, but I'd still say he's far easier than Krang was in Turtles 3, for instance. If anything, he's really scary when you're low on lives. Because he does hurt, especially here on hard mode. If you're playing in normal mode, not much to write home about all the same. I'm trying to think, have we ever had just a boss fight against Krang on his own without the Super Krang body? I guess there was like the weird little saucer he had in Turtles in Time, but that's not really just Krang. Mind you, I guess he is a little Ultron brain alien thing, so what can he really do on his own? Mind you, I say that! But the rise of the TMNT movie showed that Krang as a species could potentially be threatening just on their own. That movie is intense. And learning that apparently there were cuts to that movie to make it more PG makes sense with just how that opening is. That movie gets dark fast. Alright, when he's lower on health, he also likes to throw out some mines that sort of track onto you. He tends to do this, I find, more often than not during his last point of health. Not a lot to write home about, but that attack can be kind of threatening, if only because it comes out of nowhere and they do literally track onto you. But he's down all the same. I couldn't stop her, but Super Shredder will. Yeah, good luck with that. But before the final boss, we got one last section level, and you didn't think they could go beat him up without an elevator stage, did ya? Of course they had to put one of these in. It's nothing but a giant onslaught of singular types of Foot Clan at a time, though. It's not a lot to write home about. If I had to pick a hardest quote-unquote floor here, because they eventually stopping at the doors, there's one where they throw a bunch of monsters at you, which can very easily kind of just combo lock you if they grab onto you enough. And there's also a portion where they throw, I think, 4 of the Tonfa-wielding foot soldiers at you. And because you have very limited room to dash around, it's going to be probably easier early on in that section to just hit them with the 4th hit of your combo. Because admittedly, the good thing about fighting enemies in this game is that even if they're blocking your attacks, they still get locked by you attacking them. so they can't actively attack you while you're doing that. If anything, that's where the ones behind you become a problem, and they do actively try to surround you, so I guess a good way to get around a lot of foot soldiers in this section is just to kind of hold towards a wall, because at least then they can't sneak up on you, but I think they still technically can from above. Oh, the roadkill rod in these sections is also a little annoying, but that's just because they like to move around so much. But at least that also makes them, in a way, very predictable where they can go. Something I find kind of funny, though, I was poking around looking at speedruns between parts. Raph is the main turtle for speedrunners just because of his movement speed alone, which I find a little surprising because I would figure, in that regard, maybe Mikey would be chosen just because of his higher strength. But no, the speed is more preferable there, I guess, in this case. And it's to the point where his individual difficulties, Raph, have different categories on the speedrunning site. But by and large, Donnie, Leo, and Mikey's difficulties are all lumped into one subcategory. I just find that funny. Going back to what's happening on screen, though. From memory, this section can be a little tight on two-player, only because I think they do throw more enemies at you. But you also got more players, so eh. Multiplayer in beat-em-ups is a very weird thing to balance, it feels like. Because either you get a point where the two players can just rinse everything that's in front of them with no problem, or you just get too mobbed and it just feels unfair even for two people. And in my experience, a lot of games tend to go towards more the latter. There's a healthy balance in the middle there, but it feels like a lot of games either didn't care because of the whole rental paradigm to deal with back in the 80s and 90s. Or they just couldn't figure it out with the mechanics they had. Nowadays, beat-em-ups, whenever they get released, tend to be a bit better about that, I've noticed. A bit here and there, like Scott Pilgrim definitely gets more towards the mobbing you period, even on single player. But even then, some games that tend to be more mob-based might have more crowd control options, so at least there's usually ways around it. It really depends. With that said, I believe that was the last normal enemy in the game. We're on to the final boss. As soon as the game lets me through the door, there we go. Notably, Statue of Liberty is not here because it wasn't kidnapped at the start of the game like it was in Turtles in Time. Hello, Super Shredder. Now I'll show you the real power of the Hyperstone. So this fight is almost identical to how it was in Turtles in Time. The reason I say almost, that's technically a little easier. Because he's only got 3 attacks. The blue one, which shoots ice upwards. The green one, the red one, which shoots fire downwards. And the green one, which shoots an energy ball forward. The green one is to be avoided at all costs because it is an instant kill. The red one will burn you. The blue one, though, is supposed to freeze you in Turtles in Time, but it doesn't freeze you here, meaning there's literally no problem with approaching him. In fact, the blue attack is what you want to see him do the most because he leaves himself the most open during it. He's technically open during the red attack as well, but because of how fast his attacks come out, the blue attack's the one that really leaves him any kind of room to be attacked from all angles. Red, you have to kind of attack him from behind, and green, you should probably just stay away, period. This fight is dangerous, but it's also very easy. I'd say because of the fact that you don't get frozen by the blue attack, it's overall the easier fight. Again, Hyperstone Heist's bosses aren't exactly anything special. They have some cool stuff going on here and there, but they're pretty easy to take out. The game's hardest in its stages just because they throw so much more at you. Which I guess is kind of the point of stages in beat-em-ups. They're meant to kind of whittle down your resources while also building your score, and the bosses are either supposed to kick you while you're getting down or have really hard to get around attacks. And in Turtles, the hardest to get around attacks usually are the ones that come out with like no warning, like combo escapes or things like that. Again, though, I brought this up I think in Turtles 3 as well as Turtles 4 back when with Scott, I think. It's at least a little reflective of how Super Shredder was in Turtles 2, the movie. Incredibly powerful. Goes down pretty quickly, though. Glass cannon to the end. And there's not even a second phase you really have to worry about. Once that health bar's drained, you're done with the game. I guess adding another phase would have been a little extra, though, but it would have been cool to see the Genesis get something that exclusive, in a way. Get that last health bar down, and you are done, which I believe happens right about as soon as he does the blue attack. There we go. That's game. Damn, boy. evil villain, Shredder, has been defeated. And our city has been returned to its normal size. Who was really responsible for saving this city? The true answer is shrouded in mystery. This has been April O'Neil reporting. Good night. And like in Turtles in Time, we get a Genesis variant of the song Pizza Power from the Coming Out of Our Shells tour, I believe was the name of that weird musical thing, which wasn't very good at all, but this song kicks ass. It kind of summarizes the game. It is definitely lesser in most ways than Turtles in Time, between stage variety, control things, between the dash being a button on its own, and I appreciate Hyperstone Heist for its eccentricities, I guess is the way I want to phrase it, compared to Turtles in Time. I prefer the faster speed. I like its deeper cuts and reaches for some boss fights like Human, Baxter Stockman, and Tatsu. But Turtles in Time overall is just the better experience between the extra throws, the better stage variety, and overall more, I'm not going to say balanced difficulty, but the stage lengths, meaning you don't have to do nearly as many marathons. It's still worth your time if you liked Turtles in Time overall, but I would say Turtles in Time, be it arcade or SNES, is going to be more worth your effort. If you want to play it, it's on the Genesis. It was on the Cowabunga collection that released late last year in 2022. And I think that's about it, because I don't think Turtles in Time or Hyperstone Heist were ever on any of the virtual consoles, not that that matters now, because they're all down. The big question comes down to now of what do we do next with Turtles on the channel? And thinking about it, from my own experience, we'll probably end up going on to the GameCube or something with like Battle Nexus or whatever the name of the first one of those 2003 games was. Or ultimately we'll probably end up going over to the Game Boy for the 3 games they put out on that. I think there was only 3. I don't think there was a Turtles 4 on Game Boy. Because I really want to eventually get to Radical Rescue, because even though that game kicked my ass while I was growing up, I really do like what it does. And I'll eventually try to get Shredder's Revenge going on the channel. I need to play that on my own time first. And I'll try to get that to be a multiplayer playthrough, probably. I can't promise 6 players, but I could probably get at least 4 players going, thinking about who I know. Yeah, if you ever see it, you'll have seen it, I guess is the way to say it. Also notably, and I do cut this out, after the credits you are taken to the high score page to input your initials and all that. It doesn't matter though, because the game doesn't actually save that, that's more just for writing down and spreading along your friends, so I assume probably on the Cowabunga collection there's probably some actual leaderboards there that you can share with your friends to actually see what everyone's gotten, or there's maybe achievements tied to it or something, but for the purposes of this LP on the Genesis, not really a reason to show that. But with that and these credits wrapping up, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, have a great night, take care, and I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. See you guys then.